Good evening. This is the news tonight, your daily roundup of all that has happened across India and the world. I'm Ishan Russell, and tonight our focus is on the Congress Party's attempts at revival. What is the party's new strategy? We'll talk about that a little later in the bulletin. But first, the headlines we're tracking right now. The Congress decides to make the ordinance route costly for the BJP government. Party's protests against the land ordinance to start from tomorrow. Ajay Markan to lead Congress battle for Delhi State Assembly and head the party's 101-member campaign committee for the elections. The BJP cracks down on indiscipline in the ranks, pulls up its MP Sakshi Maharaj for his comment urging Hindu women to have at least 4 children. And Pakistan assures US Secretary of State John Kerry it won't differentiate between good and bad terrorists. The US asks Pakistan to do more against terror. Top story tonight. Starting tomorrow, the Congress will be focusing on a series of agitations against the BJP government, most of them focusing on the controversial land ordinance. The Congress Working Committee that met today discussed the issue along with other political matters. The coming days could see the Congress targeting the BJP government at the centre on taking the ordinance route to governance. In particular, the Land Acquisition Ordinance that has generated much controversy.
The Land Acquisition Act came into effect after wide-ranging talks and consultations. This government has effectively destroyed this landmark legislation and brought back the law passed by the British in 1894 through the back door.
While party leaders call the Land Acquisition Ordinance a move against the interests of farmers, the party is focusing on the entire ordinance route being taken by the government.
जो एनडीए सरकार विधेयक पारित करी जा रही है और एक विधेयक जो आप कहते हैं ऑर्डिनेंस रूल चला रही है उसके ऊपर भी चर्चा हुई. The government ordinance makes significant changes to the Land Acquisition Act that was piloted by the previous UPA government. This includes removal of consent clause to acquire land for 5 areas of industrial corridors, PPP projects, rural infrastructure, affordable housing and defence. We are going to organize agitations against the Land Acquisition Bill.
In the last few weeks, the controversial land ordinance has emerged as a major rallying point for the opposition. 2 weeks ago, the Trinamool Congress staged mass protests in Kolkata. The Congress has already asked state units to launch agitations on the matter before the 15th of February, when the budget session of Parliament is expected to begin. The party has also formed a strategy group to take up the issue more effectively in Parliament. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. All right, to help us understand what exactly is the Congress Party's strategy as far as this land acquisition ordinance is concerned, we have with us Purnima Joshi. She is the political editor at the Hindu Business Line. Thanks very much, Purnima, for coming in. So tell us why the land acquisition or the ordinance route is being targeted by the Congress Party, and what has prompted this also, and how will it, I mean, there's an entire argument about development and fast-tracking infrastructure projects versus but this entire argument about the land bill that the Congress is now pushing forth.
Well, there is an argument, which incidentally, if I'm correct, was voiced by the Congress itself. In June, there was a meeting of the chief ministers where a whole lot of state representatives, chief ministers, had voiced concerns about piling of various compensation claims, land acquisitions, infrastructural projects not getting off the ground because of the 2013 Act. So this is being talked about. There are 2 views in the Congress about this, but obviously the opposition party has decided that there is enough political pull in the development argument and also the resentment against bringing ordinances. I'm not going into the argument of whether the government should or shouldn't bring ordinances.
Right.
But this is more a political stand that the Congress has taken, which they obviously believe has some sort of a pull with the people. But
Yeah, because they're obviously taking this issue to the people, but then there's the budget session of Parliament that is also coming up, and the BJP is expected to, do a lot of, push a lot of its economic agenda through in that. But given that the way the Congress is thinking about the land acquisition ordinance, we could see a stormy session over there as well.
Yeah, I agree with you because, you see, I would have thought that the BJP would, the ruling party would bring these amendments in the last session, or because I hadn't sensed a lot of opposition from within the Congress to these amendments, which are basically in the area of rural infrastructure, of building industrial corridors, defense production. Obviously there is a view about bringing in ordinances and amending acts that have been passed by Parliament, but you see, there is a capital city that has to be built in Andhra Pradesh.
Right.
And there are concerns from within the Congress about this. But insofar as the Act itself is concerned, the 2013 Act itself is concerned, I think these are more issues of the implementation, of how it is being worked at the ground level, how the state governments are dealing with it. Because the arguments against invoking an eminent domain and dispossessing people, resettling them, those arguments still stand. And that Act, 2013 Act, had been hailed as a right to fair compensation to a lot of people who stand dispossessed, and our country's record in resettling people, rehabilitating people, giving out compensations has not been very good.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, there is a real political and a development argument which is being voiced by the government, and BJP is quite confident of pushing this legislation through. So street protests are fine. I would be interested in seeing what the Congress does in Parliament, because if you want to block something because you think it has a political weight, then it's fine. But I think there's a lot of opposition from within the Congress at what the party is doing.
All right, so the Congress itself perhaps in two minds, as you're suggesting, but a very quick response to this, Purnima, about sort of Rahul Gandhi's stamp on this entire idea and this entire move. Is this Rahul Gandhi taking the reins of the party and pushing it in a direction where it's more confrontational with the government? Looks
like that, because Rahul Gandhi had taken a very clear stand during the Vedanta struggle in Orissa. He had himself gone there, and so this is part of the pro-poor sort of welfare politics that Rahul Gandhi is trying to do, and I hope his party is totally with him on this.
All right, interesting point. You leave it over there. Yeah. But thanks very much for coming in and sharing this perspective with us on this particular issue. All right, now with Delhi Assembly polls just 3 weeks away, the Congress pulled up its socks in an attempt to make a turnaround. The party named Ajay Maken as the chairman of the Congress's 101-member campaign committee for the polls. At the meeting of the CWC today, the party also decided to launch a massive membership drive by launching a nationwide mass contact program.
Hoping to reverse its disastrous electoral performances recently, the Congress Working Committee decided to make structural changes in the party. Congress is planning to carry out massive membership drive as party chief Sonia Gandhi stressed on keeping internal systems and processes robust.
The Central Election Authority has prepared a note on the membership drive and proposed amendments to the party constitution. This note is with you. We now need to apply our collective wisdom to discuss these reforms and its proposed implementations.
After a crushing defeat in Lok Sabha elections followed by a string of losses in state assembly elections, Congress's central leadership has now turned the spotlight on strengthening the party's organizational structure in a bid to revive the morale of party's rank and file. The party named Ajay Maken to lead its campaign for Delhi Assembly polls. He will lead 101-member committee in an attempt to make a comeback in the national capital.
Mr. Ajay Maken will head this campaign committee. Mr. Ajay Maken, as the chairman of the committee, We have constituted a 101-member campaign committee.
In clear indication that Congress will exploit AAP government's instability last year to boost its chances this time, the party will launch former Chief Minister Sheila Dikshit to campaign. Markan also made it clear that the party will aggressively target Aam Aadmi Party in its campaign.
She does not want to be in the electoral politics, but she will be one of our main campaigners. She will be actively in the campaign.
We are coming out with another set of booklets on Aam Aadmi Party. And the title of that booklet, as I said yesterday to some people, the title of that booklet would be 49 दिन की सरकार, दिल्ली हुई बेहाल, U-turn Kejriwal.
Congress is yet to make its stand public on the issue of statehood for the national capital. With bureau inputs, Vishal Daya, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, former Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal launched the Aam Aadmi Party's campaign in Delhi today. He addressed a public meeting in the Sultanpur Majra constituency. Admitting his mistake of quitting within 49 days of his government, Kejriwal put the blame on the BJP and the Congress for his decision. He's urging voters to bring the party back to power with an absolute majority this time.
मैंने ये सोच के इस्तीफा दिया था कि आज इस्तीफा दे रहा हूं, जनता बहुत खुश है, कल चुनाव हो जाएंगे, इस बार जनता 50 सीट देगी तो बिना कांग्रेसियों के 5 साल काम करके दिखाएंगे। मेरे को ये क्या पता था ये चुनाव ही नहीं कराएंगे, मेरे को ये क्या पता था राष्ट्रपति शासन लगा देंगे।
And on the other side, the BJP has decided to crack down on leaders making controversial remarks. It has sent a notice to MP Sakshi Maharaj for his statements on Hindu women raising 4 children. But the party was once again embarrassed by another BJP leader in West Bengal who went a step further.
There was further embarrassment for BJP on Tuesday, with another of its leader coming out with a controversial remark. BJP leader Shamal Goswami went a step further than MP Sakshi Maharaj.
যে সামঞ্জস্য রাখার জন্য কিন্তু আজকে প্রত্যেকটি ভারতবাসীর মা এবং বোনদের আমি বলতে চাই আগামী দিনে যদি 5টা করে হিন্দুদের সন্তান জন্ম না নেয় ভারতবর্ষের কিন্তু সমতা থাকবে না।
The latest remarks come a day after BJP slapped a notice to Sakshi Maharaj for making a similar comment a few days ago. He has been given 10 days to reply to the notice, explaining his statements against party line. However, Sakshi Maharaj claimed he hasn't received any notice.
अगर पार्टी ने कोई नोटिस दिया होगा, मेरे कार्यालय को मिला होगा, मुझे अभी अवगत नहीं किसी नोटिस का, और फिर ये हमारे घर का मामला है। आपसे मीडिया वालों से क्या लेना देना? हम एक पार्टी के सदस्य हैं। अगर हमसे कुछ बात गलत निकली होगी, हमारी पार्टी ने हम नोटिस दिया होगा, हम उसका उत्तर दे देंगे। आप क्यों परेशान हो रहे हैं?
Sakshi Maharaj has been the BJP MP from Unnao has been issued a show cause notice for his statements which the party had completely disapproved of, and issued a statement on the day of his he made those remarks.
Opposition parties slammed BJP for failing to rein in those making such controversial remarks. They called for stricter action.
देखिए ये तो इनके एजेंडे का एक हिस्सा है। ये देश का ध्यान बटाना चाह रहे हैं क्योंकि 7 महीनों में ये सरकार जो बड़े वादे करके आई थी उन सब पे विफल हुई, तो ये देश का ध्यान बटाने के लिए इस तरह की बेहुदा बयान दे रहे हैं।
BJP had been left embarrassed earlier too during the winter session of Parliament in December. The session witnessed repeated protests by the opposition demanding a clarification from Prime Minister Narendra Modi over conversions and communal statements. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, the government today amended the anti-smoking law to impose a hefty fine on smoking in public places from the present 200 rupees to 1,000 rupees. It also banned the sale of loose cigarettes while increasing the minimum age of people buying tobacco products to 21 years from the present 18. The changes make violation of the proposed law much more stringent than the existing act. The draft bill increases the maximum fine to 1 lakh rupees from the present 10,000 rupees. Now, the government recommended removal of designated smoking zones in hotels and restaurants. The Health Ministry has also sought suggestions from the public on its draft bill. Let's take a look at all the other national news we are tracking in Nationwide. Noted economist Arvind Panagria took charge as the first vice chairman of the newly created Niti Aayog. Panagria will be at the helm of the newly formed body with the Prime Minister as its chairperson. He is an Indian-American economist and professor of economics at the Columbia University. A man identified as the chief recruiting officer of the militant outfit, the NDFBS, was arrested along with 7 others along the Bhutan border in the Chirang district of Assam. The arrest was made in a joint operation conducted by the army and the Assam police. A Delhi court today framed charges against the driver of US-based cab service provider Uber for the alleged rape and kidnapping of a 25-year-old woman executive in Delhi. The judge also ordered trial on a day-to-day basis from the 15th of January. The accused Shiv Kumar Yadav has pleaded not guilty to the offence. Well, time for a very quick break right now, but coming up on the other side, France pays tribute to the Paris attack victims as Charlie Hebdo comes out with its first edition since the massacre. Welcome back. You're watching the news tonight. Some international news now, and the US has asked Pakistan to take concrete steps to fight militant groups that threaten India. Afghan and US interests in the region. Addressing a joint press conference in Islamabad today, US Secretary of State John Kerry said groups like the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Taliban and the Haqqani network pose serious threats to peace in South Asia. He also urged India and Pakistan to return to the talking table to work out bilateral issues.
US Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Pakistan on Monday on an unannounced trip to urge the Nawaz Sharif government to do more to crack down on militant groups. His visit comes barely a month after the Peshawar school massacre, in which 134 children were killed by Taliban. Addressing a joint press conference with Sharif's foreign advisor Sartaj Aziz, Kerry said all extremist groups should be targeted equally. While acknowledging Pakistan Army's offensive against militants, Kerry called for more stringent action to fight terror groups like LET, which carried out the 26/11 Mumbai attacks in 2008.
Terror groups like the Pakistani and Afghan Taliban, the Haqqani network, Lashkar-e-Toiba, and other groups continue to pose a threat not just to Pakistan and its neighbors, but also to the United States and the world. The task is a difficult one, and it is not done. We all have a responsibility to ensure that these extremists are no longer able to secure a foothold in this country or elsewhere.
Pak Foreign Advisor Sartaj Aziz assured that Pakistan has been able to neutralize the threat of the Haqqani network. The group claimed responsibility for the attacks on Indian embassy in Kabul that killed 58 people in 2008. It had also targeted the US Embassy in 2011.
As far as Haqqani network is concerned, since after the North Waziristan operation, their infrastructure is totally destroyed, and our commitment to Afghanistan not to allow our territory to be used against any other country would not have been possible unless we had taken this operation in North Waziristan. So to that extent, their ability to operate from here across to Afghanistan is virtually disappeared.
Kerry also reacted to the recent ceasefire violations along the line of control. He urged the two nations to find a diplomatic solution to improve bilateral ties.
We are concerned about the rise of the number of incidents on the border and line of control. Clearly, it is in everybody's interest to find a way to resolve these kinds of differences peacefully, and we encourage the parties to do so. I can't emphasize enough that it is profoundly in the interests of Pakistan and India to move their relationship forward.
But Pakistan has put the onus on India to resume bilateral talks. Sartaj Aziz said Pakistan will not begin talks with India without the Kashmir issue being discussed. Pakistan blames India for calling off the Foreign Secretary level talks in August last year. The centre decided to cancel the talks after Pakistan High Commissioner Abdul Basit met Kashmiri separatists despite Delhi's objections. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
Meanwhile, India has dismissed Pakistan's charges of involvement in that country's insurgencies, terming the blame as a sign of its guilt and desperation. The army chief said the frequent firing by Pak troops on the Jammu and Kashmir border raised fresh threats and challenges to the relationship.
After a brief lull, reports again of firing by Pakistan on the Jammu and Kashmir border over the last 48 hours, and Indian troops responding. Already the BSF has spoken of the shelling being attempted cover for over 100 Pak militants waiting to sneak into India. India's army chief has underlined the rising threat because of active borders.
Infrastructure or the camps which are there in the across the border are intact. Pakistan is supporting proxy war in J&K.
India rubbished the Pakistan defence minister's charge of it being behind insurgencies in that country. The public statements against India have been making their way into Pak mainstream media. Experts in India see it as little more than strategy overkill.
Pakistan has created all these militant organizations and Pakistan has become the international hub of terrorism. This statement should be condemned by all community and Pakistan. These are the people, created by the Pakistan who have, some of them have turned against the Pakistani establishment as well,
As the probe continues on the alleged terror boat issue, the Home Ministry claimed the intercepted conversations were not friendly, with continuing terse statements emanating from Pakistan. The way ahead for the neighbours doesn't look smooth. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Now, the Narendra Modi government got a pat on the back from none other than UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Ban, who is on a 4-day visit to India, has said India could play a leadership role in addressing global challenges like maintenance of regional and global peace and clean development. He's been meeting government ministers in New Delhi over the past 2 days. The United Nations Secretary General praised Prime Minister Modi as a forward-looking leader, commending the Smart Cities initiative, saying countries worldwide could emulate such initiatives. He urged stronger commitment by India on the climate change issue.
We need to use all innovative technologies. The effort to enhance energy and provide the renewable energy in Indian energy policy mix is a very important one. And 100 Smart Cities initiative by Indian government is also something very important. I hope many countries in the world will emulate such leadership initiative of India.
Now, in the aftermath of the terror attacks in France, French President François Hollande paid an emotional tribute to the 3 police officers shot in the Paris terror attack. Hollande posthumously bestowed France's top honor, the Légion d'honneur, on the 3 officers. As funeral ceremonies were held in Paris and Jerusalem, Hollande vowed that France would never yield to terror. 4 Jewish men were gunned down at a kosher supermarket. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon today favoured firm and committed action by the international community against the menace of terror. France's Charlie Hebdo magazine is to remain defiant despite the terror killing of 10 of its cartoonists last week. The first edition after the attack will have a cartoon on the cover showing the Prophet Muhammad holding a sign, Jesus Charlie, and the slogan in French saying, "All is forgiven." Up to 3 million copies are likely to be printed, way beyond its usual print run of 60,000, in response to soaring demand from readers who want to show solidarity with the satirical magazine.
The Secretary General is strongly committed to the essential work of countering extremism, fighting anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination, and upholding the rights to freedom of speech and expression. The Secretary General calls for heightened efforts to promote tolerance and understanding.
Then, in embarrassment for the United States, the Twitter and YouTube accounts of the US military command were hacked by a group claiming to back the Islamic State. The accounts had been suspended for a few hours. While the US military said it was not a serious data breach, the White House has pledged to look into the hacking very seriously.
The Twitter and YouTube accounts of the US military in the Middle East and South Asia were hacked by supporters of Islamic State militants on Monday. At CENTCOM, the account used by the US Central Command tweeted out messages threatening attacks on US military personnel and expressing sympathy for the Islamic State. Nearly simultaneously, the Central Command's YouTube channel hosted 2 pro-IS videos. However, other websites and social media accounts of the US military remained unaffected.
I can tell you this is something that we're obviously looking into and something that we take seriously.
there's a pretty significant difference between what is a large data breach and the hacking of a Twitter account. So we're still examining and investigating the extent of this incident.
Embarrassingly for the United States, the hack came at a time when President Barack Obama was giving a speech in Washington on the issue of cybersecurity.
We're introducing new legislation to create a single, strong national standard so Americans know when their information has been stolen or misused.
Other messages on the hacked Twitter account from the group that called itself Cyber Caliphate implied that the hackers had captured military secrets. But the documents that were released reportedly contained only widely available and non-official information. Central Command, one of the US military's 5 regional commands, has been conducting nearly daily airstrikes against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria since August last year. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And more international news and updates in Global Buzz. The cockpit voice recorder from the crashed AirAsia flight has been retrieved from the Java Sea. The retrieval comes a day after the flight data recorder, or the so-called black box, was also found. The 2 devices will help investigators to piece together the sequence of events that led to the crash. The device will be flown to Indonesia's capital Jakarta to be downloaded and analyzed with the other box. Experts say a final analysis could take up to a month. An Egyptian High Court has overturned the only remaining conviction against former President Hosni Mubarak and his 2 sons, opening the way for his possible release 4 years after the revolution that toppled him. The court has ordered a retrial. 86-year-old Mubarak was sentenced to 3 years in prison last May for diverting public funds. Italian President Giorgio Napolitano steps down from office today. Prime Minister Matteo Renzi made the announcement to this effect. 89-year-old Napolitano had announced last month that he would like to resign because of age-related health problems. He had reluctantly agreed to serve a second term in 2013 in order to break a parliamentary deadlock. Pope Francis arrived in Sri Lanka's capital city Colombo today. He urged Sri Lanka to uncover the truth of the civil war as part of the healing process between religious communities. New Sri Lankan President Sirisena hailed the visit as a blessing for his new government. Pope Francis is in Asia on a 6-day tour. He will next travel to the Philippines. All right, all the sports news now in Sports Beat. Suspended Pakistan off-spinner Saeed Ajmal's modified bowling action will be put to an official test by the ICC in Chennai on the 24th of January. Ajmal was suspended from bowling in international cricket last September for an illegal bowling action. He's already withdrawn his name from the World Cup, admitting his remodeled bowling action is not ready for top-tier cricket. South Korea qualified for the Asian Cup quarter-finals after beating Kuwait 1-0 on Tuesday. South Korea scored the goal 10 minutes before half-time through midfielder Nan's header. Now, South Korea now has 6 points from 2 games in the tournament. In another match, Australia also qualified from the group after beating Oman 4-0. Argentine football legend Diego Maradona claimed to have received a letter from a president of Cuba, Fidel Castro, quashing reports of his death. Maradona revealed that the 4-page letter discussed global oil consumption, the release of 3 Cuban intelligence agents by the US, and the recent summit of the leftist ALBA bloc of Latin American countries. Castro has been absent from public view for more than a year. Well, before we end the show, let's bring you a glimpse of tennis legends Roger Federer and Leighton Hewitt in action. The two were seen playing tennis across 2 speedboats near Sydney's Opera House, hitting tennis balls back and forth as they travelled. We'll leave you with that. That's it from us on the news tonight.